right, welcome back to the program. Thanks for staying with NewsNight, and I'm seeing a lot of your feedback. Hashtag NewsNight, SMS line 22422. Let's sample some of your comments and questions at this time. All right, Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok, you say Kenyans will only listen to manifestos with a formula of reducing the high cost of living and how to slay the dragon of corruption, not public relations. All right, Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok there. The next one coming up, Pelinet, you say as intellectuals, how do they want to convince Kenyans that their hope is in their manifestos, and yet the previous ones haven't really worked for Kenyans? Okay, that's an interesting one. I'll make sure I get a response. Edward Ocheng, you say, in the end, it's of no use. Only a handful of Kenyans have read and digested the contents of the manifesto. People have already decided which side they support, with or without the manifestos. This will be nothing but another academic debate with little effect to the voters. Okay, but anyway, thanks for watching. Nevertheless, Abraham David, you're saying, question to David D. Why does your manifesto talk too much on finances more than its background, yard, or source? Okay, Abraham, let's get a response. Athanas Mavuti, ask both of them how they will finance their manifestos. They did not tell us. Okay, that's from Athanas. Let's see what else. Victor Thinker, kindly ask D the difference between the Hustler Fund and already existing funds like Uwezo Fund. Okay, that question seems to keep coming up. I think we have another two more. All right. Olum Justice, you say politicians hide in manifestos. They keep telling Kenyans sugar-coated lies. Once in office, they come together to loot our country, then resurface 5 years later with the very lies in a perfected language of deceit. We deserve better. And okay, that was the last one. I also wanted to look at our SMSs. 22422 is our SMS line. Wahiga, you don't tell us where you're writing in. Or Jerry from Nairobi, you say, kindly ask the Kenya Kwanza representative, the funds to be given out are more than 1.6 trillion. Where will it come from? Okay, that's, I guess it's the same question. And let me see here. Okay. Somebody says we must start educating our people on what corruption is, the consequences, how to fight it, and obeying the rule of law regarding the same. You don't tell us where you're writing in from. Okay, gentlemen, those are some of the questions and comments our viewers have this evening. Dr. Ndi, it seems Kenyans are interested in finding out how the different funds, and I think someone counted 10 of them, will be financed in an economy with a growing, a bulging deficit, debt repayments that you are very familiar with. And you've told us the international economy generally is also struggling as well. Tough days ahead. How will you finance?
I'll come to that.
Your promises.
That's my forte, I'll tell you. But I want to talk about corruption. If you listen to Odur, he talked about educating people, political will, all sorts of the same things we have been saying.
Punishing those found guilty.
Punishing those guilty, but you choose which ones and which ones not to. So control.
I didn't say that.
No,
I didn't say we do.
I'm not saying you do. I don't say.
Yeah,
I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Why insinuating?
No, I was implying why we need to free the judiciary.
Yeah.
But my point is the following.
Yes.
Those things have no teeth. Now,
all the things that Kenya has done before have
no teeth. That's why I said, what's your theory of change about corruption? Our theory of change is that what is the structural cause of corruption? The structural cause of corruption is state capture. That's our theory.
Some would say it's inequality.
That's our theory. You can come with yours.
Okay.
So what are we going to do about it? We are going to start a state capture inquiry. How will it work? It's a quasi-judicial inquiry. In NAC, when we came in, we tried to do the same with the Golden Bag issue, which was the biggest corruption issue of the time. We said Golden Bag has clogged our courts. We need to take it offline so that it's ventilated out there. And Golden Commission. Now, what you're saying, we are talking about our judiciary, people trying to capture our judiciary, people weaponizing corruption, people capturing the power sector, all sorts of sector. We have now a scandal around the port of Mombasa being concessioned to Dubai or some other people. So we have also, so we are saying we should put people out there, not us, so that we are not being told we are weaponizing. And there's a terms of reference. Can you tell us how our institutions are captured and what we need to do to insulate them from capture. So people will go and say, in the power, there are lots of activists in the power sector who are talking about problems with IPPs. And in fact, Uhuru Kenyatta himself instituted a task force the other day. In our manifesto, we have talked about making IPPs transparent. We want those people to tell us, is our power sector captured? Are there attempts to capture our judiciary? Are our ports captured? It's not about an individual. We want an institutional analysis. I said our manifesto opens with political economy. So we want these people to do a report which traces this nexus between wealth and power that we believe is the heart of why people want to keep the state captured, so that they can repurpose institutions to do exactly what he's saying, to shake down investors, to do all manner of things. They don't do it for nothing. They do it so that they can remain wealthy at the expense of everybody else. Now, when we did that, some people said, but you can't do that. You're going after Uhuru. Others told me, but you promised us that you would not deal with corruption, that it was not going to be a priority. No, we did not say corruption is not going to be a priority. We said we are not running on an anti-corruption ticket. We are running on a bottom-up economics platform. So what we are going to do, we are going to take all the corruption stuff and offline it to people who are better equipped to deal with it and people we don't control, so that we can get on with the job of fixing the economy.
Who are these people?
These are retired judges, commissions.
Who pays them?
The state. It is that.
What's the difference between them and the?
That is
how
the
hard
way.
or easy will it?
That is the way South Africa is dealing with it. It has a state capture inquiry. Dealing with the Guptas and all the capture of their power sector, and all sorts of people are falling out of that. You cannot deal with corruption unless you do something, you shake up the system. This idea of let's educate our people, let us be nice, we are not being nice. And you can already see that it has caused jitters where it should.
Is Kenya Kwanza ready to have some of its principals potentially also called to speak?
They have.
Because of the position they've sat in government.
They will be called.
Odor.
Yeah, this is where I want to differ with my friend David. The corruption is not an outcome of state capture. State capture is actually a consequence. And where there is corruption, any society where there is corruption, they go for the state, because that is where the instruments of law enforcement are. So actually you have corruption, then it leads to state capture. It's not the other way around. And if you look at the history of corruption in this country, it's about, you find that it started in a fairly innocent and not very serious manner, where people began getting gifts. You are a deal, somebody comes with a goat and so on. Before you realize, they move from the deal to the DC to the president, and the entire system becomes captured. It's about the kind of economic and social relations we create in what we call crony capitalism, where the proximity to the state actually enables you to enjoy massive powers and wealth. So it is not the other way around. But coming to the issue of taking corruption away from the state, saying that you want to put it in a corner somewhere. What David is talking about, that is a euphemism for basically running away from accountability. Leaders must be accountable, not being taken to some corner, some retired judge who maybe during their tenure, their active tenure, might have been part of that oiling of corruption, because none of our institutions is innocent. I'm not passing a wholesale condemnation, but you go to the judiciary, you'll find corruption is thriving. You will go to our legislature, you will find corruption thriving. You will go to the legislature, you will find it. Even some of the independent offices and commissions we have created recently, you will still find corruption has permeated some of them. And therefore, it is not something you can say there is only one corner there for dealing with corruption. Corruption must be dealt with holistically.
Let me just do one final response and then do this thing. You see, Odur did not articulate a theory of change, but now he's responding to a theory of change. That's what we want. So if that's not, if this is our theory and you don't agree with it, what is yours? Now, we had something here for several years during Kibaki era called radical surgery of the judiciary. Remember? Mm-hmm. We were trying to shake up the judiciary. But we were doing radical surgery, but we were not giving the judiciary independence. We were just doing this thing, radical surgery. It wasn't working. That's the kind of thing you're talking about. So what finally happened that we begin to see a semblance of an independent judiciary? It was the new constitution. The new constitution was a political instrument which then gave judiciary independence. What have we seen since? We have seen something in political science and political economy we call counter-reform. So if you look at BBI, it was going to create a judiciary ombudsman who is accountable to the president. That is clawing back. That is the space of counter-reform, of state capture contest that we are talking about. So we have our own theory, and we're saying to strengthen our institutions, we need a process that will go back, in fact. And when he says that it started with DOs, it did not start with DOs in my view. If you were to ask where the rain started beating us, it started beating up in 1971 with something called the Degwa Commission Report. My good friend Duncan Degwa, who was chair of the head of the civil service before, was given the job of doing a commission to new terms of the civil service after. But there is a byline there where he responds to the question of whether public officials should do business. And he says, given the opportunities that have been created by Africanization, and it is in our manifesto, we have quoted that section. Maybe I should read it so that people actually believe that we have actually addressed these political economic questions.
Briefly, I still have a few more questions to go through before.
The achievement of independence in Kenya has brought with it great opportunities for individual advancement, both to main careers and in less orthodox ways. It is understandable that public servants should have taken their opportunities like other citizens. But if the benefits in some cases seem out of proportion with other citizens, it is inevitable that questions be asked as to how this came about. The commission then deliberates whether civil servants should be precluded from doing business. It was themselves. And then they rationalize in a waffle way that it should be okay as long as they declare interest. Mm-hmm. So we did something I don't think, I'm not aware of any other country has done. We legitimized state officers straddling business and government. We made it legitimate. Mm-hmm. That's why you hear them saying there's nothing wrong with me as the head of state owning half the dairy industry. That is why you hear it's in other countries you couldn't get away with that because it is so. We need to delegitimize, and our state capture inquiry is to put this where it belongs with the Kenyan public. Let me read you a tweet here by George Morara, former vice chair, Kenya Human Rights Commission for a couple of years. He says, in my opinion, if we are talking about state capture, those who have captured the state are both in Kenya Kwanza and in Azimio. Hence, no guarantee that the proposed commission will not suffer the don't touch the sacred cows disease.
if that's the direction that we are going.
Yeah,
That's
it's
one.
okay for people
A
to
second viewer asks...
Yeah, but before David responds.
Great. Let me read the second one. Then, Odwor, you can actually... A second viewer then asks, David D quotes South Africa as a model of a state capture commission. It hasn't changed their corruption levels.
Things don't change overnight.
Okay. Odwor, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to agree with David as far as the Ndegwa Commission report is concerned. And I'm happy that they have raised it there. However, they do not have, they have not talked about how they are going to address that issue. Because if you look at our manifesto, we have talked exactly about the same thing, the Ndegwa report, but we have a solution. We said we will revisit it so that if you are a public servant, for heaven's sake, serve the public. If you want to make money, go to the private sector. You cannot... So
you would want to sort of undo what the Ndegwa report opened up.
Exactly, and we have put it in black and white. It doesn't have to wait for another commission who will, again, say we create another commission to address it. Kenya Kwanza is trying to be very clever by half, trying to tell us, yes, we recognize the problem, but we will look for solution elsewhere.
The state capture inquiry is not the thing which will stop. We will do that. The state capture is to say we have given our institutions the independence that they are given by the Constitution. Mm-hmm. But there is a political reality on the ground of people who are clawing back power, who are trying to recapture the judiciary. We have people who have entrenched businesses' interest in the power sector. We have people who are entrenched in all sorts of sectors. They will not just lie down and die. So, and they are actually the ones who have captured Raila Odinga.
That's a statement you'd have to quantify.
I can't do that, but I have said it publicly many times, so I am not saying anything new. Let me talk about the funds.
Talk about funding. Both of you asked how you're going to fund.
Okay, let me talk about what's the difference between our Hustler funds.
Let's make them. Now I'm out of time. Briefly, please.
What are Hustler fund and difference with the funds we have? The funds that we have give little loans to individuals. Uwezo fund, all sorts of people. The fund we are creating, its purpose is to capitalize a third-tier banking system at the bottom of the pyramid. So it is not to lend money to individuals, but to capitalize SACCOs and all the institutions, because we have a two-tier banking system now. Mm-hmm. We have banks which lend money to big business at 10 to 12%. We created a second tier called microfinance banks and MFIs, which we thought would reach the bottom. But they also lend only businesses with collateral at maybe 18 to 20% before we put caps. And we're saying all those people I called people in the lottery economy, the people in the no-collar economy, 10 million of them, they are borrowing from money lenders and predatory fintechs at 1,000, 2,000% per year. So what we're saying is that this money we are putting in there is capital for them to be lending themselves. So you have a SACCO. We calculate how much capital can support your Boda members or your Mamba Boga. We lend you that money long term for 10 years. It circulates among your members, and they no longer have to be out of there. So it is not a fund for government to be running.
Which is a concern by Kwame Owino in the Institute of Economic Affairs.
It is
a government of funds.
It is not. It's a government of funds, and there's a reason for it. We are government of funds. We are doing a recovery strategy. Let me give you the reason we are government of funds.
Okay, in one sentence, please, if you can.
When we had an economic shock in 2007-8, after the government came into power, we did a stimulus program to get the economy out of trouble. And I recall Uhuru Kenyatta was finance minister. There are friends of mine who are advising him. And we said, look, if we use the government system, this money will not get where it needs to go quickly. And they made a decision which the executive normally would not. He said, we will use the CDF system. Why did they use a fund system? They used a fund system because it is quicker. So if you want to give the economy an intravenous drip, you do not put money in the ministry. It will never get there.
Odwor, 6,000 shillings to 2 million families per month.
Yeah, first of all, I want to address the issue of where are we going to get the money
to fund initiatives like that, which are very clear in your manifesto?
If you look at our manifesto, 90% of it is production. It's about production that is going to create jobs. The government can only get money from 3 sources. Number 1 is from taxes. Number 2 is from borrowing. And number 3, if you are a poor country like ours, from grants. Then there are those miscellaneous funds like fines and so on, those miscellaneous levies. That is where you can get funds. So the first thing is that you must make sure that the country is productive. And that is why we have really emphasized the focus. And it is not the government who are going to run in these industries. It's not government which is going to run agriculture. It's not government which is going to run the SMEs, which we are going to empower, we are going to reform, we are going to help. But now, at the moment, the tax regime we have is stifling itself, because the taxes are high with a very narrow base, and because they are high with a very narrow base, what it has done, it has fed corruption, in that there is more of money that would have come as taxes that are used to avoid taxes, to bribe people in KRA and elsewhere. Again, my friend likes to talk about state capture. You look for influential people who can call KRA and say your tax be waived or varied and that kind of thing. Number 2, because of that, if you look at Kenya, our compliance rate is just at around between 56 and 58% in the last 3 years. Which means that
so there is more room for...
There is more room if you can be able to make tax friendly to I as an individual who pays income tax, and this entrepreneur who is charged corporate tax and so on. And you might not know that the SMEs pay even more taxes than the big corporates. Because at the moment, the taxation, if you look at all the taxes that SMEs pay, stands at around 47%. Then there is an avenue of corruption in this country that people do not want to address, and that is called tax expenditure. Between 2017 and last year, this has risen from around 160 billion to 526 billion, I think, in 2019. Now it has come down a little to about around 320 billion shillings. This is basically an avenue for siphoning money out of government coffers, because what it is supposed to do is to basically motivate or incentivize investors. But if you look at what investors look for before they invest, these tax incentives and so on rank at number 11%. It's not their priority. That is just one of the areas. So if you expand productive base, you increase employment, and you reform tax so that you broaden the tax base and lower the tax. Now there was this question.
Yes, we need to wind up. That's really long-winded.
Yeah. No, you need to be fair. He also allows you to speak.
Yes. No, but we need to...
Allow me to control the show.
Yeah, then
briefly, please. I need to get final comments now.
Yeah, there is the issue of implementation of our manifestos. I think Kenyans can recall that in 2007, we talked about social protection program, for example. When we went into Grand Coalition government, is when the issue of social protection policy came up and was the Inua Jamii, if you remember, was launched by Raila Odinga as Prime Minister in 2012. It is the program that we are now enhancing because of the obvious reasons.
Okay.
Number two.
Okay, and briefly, please. Mm-hmm.
Our plank was infrastructure. You saw what Raila Odinga and Kibaki did with infrastructure. And you don't have necessarily to borrow heavily to do infrastructure. Actually, the infrastructure at the moment has become so expensive because of the variations that happened. For example, if you look at SGR, then we have a situation where we even borrowed over 200 billion shillings for infrastructure. We don't know whether it went into any infrastructure. We have a building here costing 20 billions, arising out of an infrastructure tender that was cancelled at JKIA, the so-called Greenfield Terminal. We can count. And when you talk about the debt rising so exponentially in the last 9 years, some of them you can trace to some of those projects.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. Let me read 2 more SMSs, get a minute final comment from both of you, and we'll wrap it up. Now, we need to allow Kenyans to go and rest. It's been a long day for them. Fred Obachi Machoka asks this evening, kindly help, if your guests can respond to this. Didn't the 2010 Constitution address the issue of independence of institutions correctly? What else is missing? That's one question. Another viewer here says, ask both your analysts representing the different sides, should we expect to see a continuation in projects started under the current regime? And what would be the implications if they decide not to continue with them? And finally, one last message here from a viewer who asks, kindly ask David Ndi whether he is involved in the campaigns of Mwende Katabaki in Kiambu County. That's I've just thrown that in there. Final comments from both of you, gents. You have a minute. David Ndi, let's start with you.
Okay, one, I don't know which economy that Oduor is in, and as a mayor, which is going to generate more tax. If you look at the business coming out of the corporate world for the last 2 years, has been profit warning after profit warning after profit warning. If you read the newspapers, the last pages, it is auction after auction after auction. The number of people bankrupted by pending bills of government in this country is, we have a serious crisis. If you listen to Odur, my friend here, the lack of evidence on what they are saying, evidence-based, is astounding, because they are saying the same old, we will create enabling environment model. It is the job of the private sector. They are waiting for new investment. That's precisely the crisis we are in. What we are saying, somebody has to inject money in production directly for us to get out of the crisis. The 500 billion shillings we are committing to SMEs
briefly
and to agriculture is coming out of development budget. We are stopping to do infrastructure and we are putting money in production without increasing the budget ceiling.
Incomplete projects.
The way you see our current budget, development budget is 700 billion shillings. If you look at 500 billion shillings, it is 100 billion a year. Every year, about that number of projects get finished. So if you stop putting that money in new projects, you shift that money to production.
Okay.
So we are not budgeting new money. We are budgeting the money which is being released by complete projects or projects that you choose to stop, and they're putting that directly in projection. By the time they create an enabling environment and wait for investors to come, and farmers have no inputs, and SMEs are paying 1,000% per year for credit, we will be in Sri Lanka. Please respond to Machoka and the other viewer who asked about Kiambu County. I think the question of independent institutions, that's precisely what we are saying. They have been created. We saw a glimpse of an independent judiciary under Maraga, and then we see what happened. The new CJ was being appointed. We saw the assault on it by BBI. There is a saying which says the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Okay. Just because you have put it on paper doesn't mean that the dragons which ate the previous institutions have died.
Okay, Kiambu County.
Yes, I am involved.
Yes, you are involved.
Totally.
With the candidature of Mwende Gatabaki?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm her campaign manager.
You're her campaign manager?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oduor, please respond to Machoka and give us your final comment on the same.
First of all, David is talking about price, these profit warnings and so on. That is because we have basically become a consumer society. So what is happening is that even if you look at the manufacturing sector, between 2019 and now, it has shrunk from 9.3% of the GDP to 7.2%, because we have completely abandoned production, whether it's in agriculture, in manufacturing. We are basically a casino economy. So what we are saying is that
briefly,
we must be able to invest in production. Investing in production creates jobs. When you create jobs, that is where the government will get its resources.
Okay.
Now, what was the
independent institutions?
I think independent institutions, they do exist in the Constitution, and as I said, political will.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Because as he said, if you don't allow them to work, they won't work. But David might not know, because he has talked so much about the BBI and the Judiciary Ombudsman. While I didn't support it, but let him go and do his work where that proposal came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing, Oduor, you like in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto? One thing? Anything?
Yes.
What is it?
They tried a bit of copying here and there from our manifesto.
David, anything you like in the Azimio?
And the other thing is that they are now committed. At least they're saying they are going to implement what they started around the Big Four agenda. But we feel flattered.
Anything, David?
1 point.
1 point.
The end of production is consumption. There is no point of producing goods which will not get consumed. So the way you want to go about production is expand your market.
Okay.
So if you start production without market, your prices will fall and your producers will lose money.
You were supposed to
the thing about the Manizero, I have no issue with what they have said, but there's no theory, there's no strategy. And the numbers, there's no evidence. When you say you are going to create 8.7 million government worker jobs, that is 40% of Kenyan's labor force. It's not possible. At any rate, there are so many numbers which are off. What I would really ask us to have another conversation is please do evidence-based policy analysis.
That's your message to him.
And David,
I'm going to have to wrap it up.
No, David, kindly read this. There's no 8.7 million jobs here. You are commenting on what you haven't read, my friend. I'll give you a copy. Go with this.
It's all right. I have it. I have it.
And that's where we wrap it up. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the ideas, the pledges, the manifestos, and two of the gentlemen who've been really involved in their manifestos here on NewsNight. Thank you so much to Oduor Ongwen, Executive Director, ODM, Asante Sana, and David D, the head of the Kenya Kwanza Policy and Programs team, for joining us on the program. And finally, Kenyans, it's up to you. On the 9th of August, you'll decide which manifesto made sense for you and which team you want to back during that particular election. We're going to wrap it up here for this moment. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible, thank you for tuning in. My sign language interpreter this evening has been Wilson Mushora. For now, let me say good night. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. We'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.